we are live. Welcome to another episode of Theory of Entertainment. I'm your host, Lex, and today we are diving into Spider-Man Brand New Day, but specifically, we are getting into my spoiler review. Oh my goodness. I have been itching and waiting to just get into this review. I got so much to talk about, so much to say, and yet I still have to contain it within this stream. I do not want to sort of go all the way out there and stream for 4 or 5 hours here. I'm going to contain myself as best as I can in terms of getting into some of the details here, but let's not yap. Let's get right into it. So for today's stream, I'm going over Spider-Man Brand New Day. I'm going to go specifically over the movie itself. So I'm going to do a review and a breakdown. The review is pretty straightforward. Talk about what I saw from the movie, what I liked about it, specific things about the film. And then for the breakdown section, I'm actually going to dive into some stuff in regards to some of the principles I was able to pick up from the movie itself and sort of break down how those are going to sort of affect and interpret different aspects of my life, whether or not this movie is actually going to push and force a change in me, right? And I think ultimately we got to look at movies in that kind of way, or else what are we doing here, right? It's important to kind of see what we watch and what we can actually take from it. What value is there, right, from the entertainment that we're watching? See, theory of entertainment is all about this idea that there's no such thing as entertainment, that everything we consume has a purpose and a meaning, and that ultimately we're able to derive some of that meaning from these different sources. We're able to ultimately come to a sense of purpose that goes beyond what we even know, right? And I won't get too deep into that for this episode. Specifically, what I want to get into again is Spider-Man Brand New Day. So for today, I'm going to just go over my overall thoughts from the movie and talk a bit about the characters, a bit about some themes, and of course, some takeaways as well. So with that said, let's dive right in. So, overall, for this movie, I thought it was excellent. At first, watching it, first watch through, I thought it was from good to great in terms of the overall feel of the movie. And then once I saw it through a second time around, processed it a bit more, I'm realizing that this movie is really, really well put together. It's super tight uh, in terms of the narrative, in terms of how they weave together the different characters and the different themes. Excellent job across the board. So it's such a well executed movie in my opinion, and I think that ultimately yeah, the execution is just so great that I have to sort of give it that nod of a great film. With that said, uh Gene, this is a spoiler review. It says it on the title. Jean Grey. Oh my goodness. Before this movie, I never really thought much of the character, in the sense that of all the X-Men characters, like let's say you're looking at your classic 90s X-Men characters, so Rogue, let's just even look at not even the overall characters. Let's just talk about the female characters. If we're looking at Rogue, you're looking at Psylocke, you're looking at Mystique, you're looking at uh, who else? Storm, right? If you're looking at all the different female characters just throughout that 90s run, even X-Men 97 as we speak, Jean Grey is usually the last of the characters that comes to mind, uh, just in terms of most of the time. Now, the thing that people love about Jean, of course, is Phoenix and the Phoenix Saga and all that stuff. But Jean Grey as a character, minus the Phoenix, you don't really ever think about that or think about her, right? And what they do in this movie that's really interesting is it's almost as though they take it from this approach that Jean Grey, that Phoenix character that you end up getting later on in her life cycle, let's say, because there's been so many versions of this character at this point, that isn't necessarily this version of her that is sort of like this possession almost, right? Like this demonic possession that is an other being that's possessing her. It's almost like implying that that is her to an extent. And as she grows and becomes more of an adult, she sort of creates this, I guess you could say, this coating or this mirror, this form of protection over herself, where she's suppressing and hiding how she truly feels and how she truly is, oftentimes. And it seems as though that's kind of what they went with here. And I'll dive more into some of this later on here, in terms of talking about more of these characters specifically. But just right off the bat, Jean Grey, every scene with her in it or with her I don't know, mental version of herself in it. Any single one of those scenes to me was just mwah, chef's kiss. So well executed. Oh my goodness, I'm excited to get into it. So Jean Grey, of course, we're going to talk about the action and stunts in this thing. I mean, they go without saying. Absolutely amazing stunt work. Absolutely amazing, like just everything. Like the swinging, best swinging we've seen in a Spider-Man movie. Like if you're just to rank all the technical aspects of this film, it's top tier, top notch across the board. No, I didn't see any hiccups anywhere with the CGI, anything. It was just on point. So I won't spend too much time on that just because it's obvious how good it is. But what really stands out here is some of the other stuff. Not necessarily those heightened moments, right? So in a superhero thing, you have those heightened, really high octane moments of action, set pieces, all that kind of stuff. And then that's contrasted with your low, quiet, dramatic moments, right? And those dramatic moments stand out so much more when you have a ton of great, awesome action, right? And not only do those dramatic moments stand out because they're just lower octane, in this film, they stand out because they're absolutely excellent. There's so many scenes I want to talk about from this film, and I'm going to see how many I can sort of run through here today, but my goodness, there's so many amazing scenes in this film between some of these characters. So I'm definitely excited to talk a bit more about that. One of the things that stood out again to me is the chemistry with some of the actors, right? Specifically, the chemistry between the actors and Tom Holland. This guy is like incredible when it comes to how he's able to affect the other actors around him to give a better performance with him in the scene. To me is incredible. Specifically, there's so many moments where he's obviously giving one of his best performances as the character, but there's a genuine sense of chemistry that you get between him and Punisher, for example, or between him and even Ned and what's her name, MJ, right? The sense of chemistry you get between him and just almost any character he's in a room with. It's really interesting. You can tell that uh, they must have all got along really well behind the scenes, right? It's just they're almost like having fun together on screen while also delivering excellent, incredible, dramatic performances. And yeah, so the chemistry between the actors really stood out to me in this scene, in this film, I should say, right? And then when it comes to the theme execution, and this I have to throw my hat off to the writers and the director here specifically, because not only were they able to really hone in on some specific themes for this movie, but the way they're able to execute and have some of these themes bounce off of each other within the film and then ultimately come together at the end, to me was just amazing. Usually when you're watching a movie, at least when I watch them, sometimes you see there's a theme they're trying to kind of get across and talk about, and then they're just at some point fumbling it, right? And they're just not able to effectively communicate it. And in this movie specifically with Brand New Day, they do a really good job at connecting some of those themes. And I don't think necessarily that it feels as though they're, hammering it, knocking on the head with it too much. I mean, they might be, but it still works. For this movie specifically, it works. And maybe it's because it's something we need to hear at this point in time. But those themes really stood out to me in terms of how they were executed. Not necessarily the themes themselves, but the effective execution of them. And then the next thing here I want to discuss as well, in terms of the overall appeal of this thing, is the layers and the foreshadowing. I felt as though they did an incredible job of foreshadowing specifically what was upcoming in interesting ways, especially in my second playthrough of the movie, or watch through the playthrough. My second time watching the movie, this was really apparent. So there's a scene earlier in the film where you get Punisher meeting with Spidey for the first time in the movie. Super fun scene. I enjoyed it a lot. Where basically Spidey's swinging around. Next thing you know, Punisher shows up, and they're both trying to tackle the problem their own way and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, in that scene specifically, uh, Spidey ends up taking out Punisher, and he says, "Go home, Frank." Right? And as he does that, Frank says a line. He's like, "I'm going to kill that kid." Right? And at first, I mean, of course, he would say that. You don't think anything of it. But then later on in the film, what happens? Frank shoots Spidey in the neck or back or wherever he gets shot, right? And it's like he goes from saying, "I'm going to kill that kid," to literally almost killing the kid. And specifically, he almost kills him over the very thing they were arguing about in that scene, which is using lethal force versus not using lethal force, and how he needs to change his ways in not using that lethal force. And it's just like the way that comes together to me is incredible. If you really think about it, like that one scene foreshadowing that later scene, which then actually leads into Frank Castle's arc, which I'll talk about later on in this review here. But like, you see what I'm saying? How they're able to weave together, right, these themes and at the same time execute effectively while also layering and foreshadowing what they're going to execute on. That's just that one moment in the film there. But there's others as well where they're continuing to foreshadow various different things. I mean, even the VMAX thing, right? And sort of where that goes is interesting as well. But yeah, so overall, the layering and foreshadowing that they execute upon in this film to me is super fun and incredible. So overall, those are my thoughts on the movie so far. And now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into a couple of different sections here so I can really weed out what I'm talking about. So let's start about characters. I'm going to go in order of the importance, specifically from the film, right? From what I've noticed. So the most important character, obviously, is Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man. Let's talk about Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So since his initial casting back in 20, I don't know, 15, 14, whatever it was, I first saw the kid and I'm like, oh wow, this guy's like perfectly cast as Spider-Man. I honestly thought like it's almost like he was born to play the character. Instantly, I knew he was incredible. And from his first scene, right? From his first scene where he, jumps in there, or not even that, his first scene with Tony and they're talking and he talks about his great power, great responsibility, remix in that scene. To me, I was like, yo, this is the perfect Peter Parker. Like, they got the perfect Peter Parker here. And then seeing him as Spider-Man, I'm like, we got the perfect Spider-Man. So from the jump, I already thought he was the perfect character to play the role. What's crazy now is he's had, what is it, 10 years as Spider-Man. And what's really meta about this film is he's also had almost the same amount of time uh, as Spider-Man within the MCU as well, maybe more, right? And it's like this interesting parallel, well, where Spider-Man's gotten really, really effective and really good on screen, and at the same time, Tom Holland has also gotten really, really good with the role. And you start to see the importance and the efficacy uh, and just the awesome aspect of an actor being able to play a character for this long. You saw it with Tony Stark's Iron Man as well, where they're able to really understand the character at a very deep level and they're able to know when to nuance certain things. Like you can just tell Tom really put a really good attention to detail in terms of what he wanted to do and where he wanted to do it. He bulked up for the movie more than I've ever seen him bulk up as well. So genuinely a great performance. One thing that really stood out to me is when he's talking to Mary Jane, or not Mary Jane, sorry, Michelle Jones. When he's talking to Michelle Jones, MJ, right? And they're in that scene, and he asks her about, what was it? It was, he asked her a question about, or she asked him a question. I forget what the question was. Maybe, oh, is there a Mrs. Spider-Man? And his reaction in that scene, in terms of the smile and the glee, and you could see how you could able to really dive into the character's thoughts. It's like he did such a great job of sharing a window into Peter Parker, right? Throughout multiple scenes, including that scene. And one of the things that is underrated and more difficult to do is a lot of his acting involves his physical acting because he's in the mask oftentimes, and they do a really good job of actually keeping Peter Parker in the mask. And a lot of his acting is also done through voice acting, right? Voice acting the character because he's behind the mask, right? And he does a great job every single aspect of the way across the board. In this movie specifically, I think one of the things that was a bit more jarring to see, and I think I kind of had a tiny issue with it, but not as much of a big deal. Is they don't explain where Pete gets all his money from. Maybe Aunt May left over an inheritance of some sort that we're unaware of. Who knows? But it looks as though he's not working a day job, but somehow can just switch apartments whenever he wants and can afford an apartment in the first place. So the whole money thing and the technology, I mean, I don't know where that comes from, but hey, it's not. It's just a nitpick at this point. Peter Parker's Spider-Man, great. In terms of his arc in the movie, specifically, his arc is central to the film and central to the themes in the film. Specifically, this idea of him being a workaholic and burying himself in his work, right? because of the emotional damage that he has, right? That he has to deal with. So him having to bury himself into his work is essentially what he's dealing with. And ultimately, he starts to see that that doesn't work out, and that ultimately he needs human connection, he needs friendship, and that shows here. And ultimately, his arc uh, comes where he's actually goes from being this person that's closed off from the world and closed off from other people, referenced by Jean Grey not being able to get into mind, to where at the end of the film, he actually opens up to Jean and says, "Get into my mind," right? And you see how that completely shifts and showcases his arc throughout the film. Well, wonderfully executed, along with all that evolving stuff that's going on too. There's just so many layers with Pete in this movie, and I can go on for just an hour talking about this one character, but I digress, right? I gotta get onto Punisher, right? I gotta get onto Punisher. Oh my goodness. Frank needed this movie, and this movie needed Frank. Seriously. Oh my goodness. I man, I loved the Punisher scenes because it's this interesting thing where he adds comedy to the film, but he's not really a funny character. Like he's sort of like, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's a joy to watch, right? Every time he's on screen, something funny's happening, right? But at the same time, he brings this heart to the movie in an amazing way. And this is capped off by one scene in particular that I want to talk about later on, where man, he just crushes it in that scene. But specifically, it hammers home some of the themes within the film and the points of the film, and it really shows a heart that is there. No character, except for maybe Hulk, which I'm not even planning on talking about in this review, right? Except for maybe Hulk, no other character in this film I feel like is really, forced in there, if that makes sense. They're there. I mean, yeah, Hulk has a purpose with the plot, kind of, and all of that. But when it comes to character work and themes, specifically, all these characters fit in a very interesting, unique way. And to me, Punisher is definitely one of those. I absolutely enjoyed every scene with him. Him and MJ playing off each other was great. Him and Pete playing off each other is great as well. And again, fitting into some of those themes of the film. So awesome, awesome job with Punisher. Jean Grey. Again, this iteration of Jean Grey is quite interesting because she's essentially the villain for the film. I mean, yeah, Metzger's in there and he's sort of like the real big bad boss villain, right? But ultimately, she's the main antagonist of the film. And what they do with Jean Grey specifically is very interesting in that I've never seen psychic powers used this way in any of these X movies specifically or Marvel movies. And I think it's absolutely great and brilliant. I love how they grounded it, right? In terms of all the explanations that they put forth, but also the range that she has to be able to jump, how they explain the telekinesis and how that works. That you could tell they really put some thought and detail into the character and how the character operates and works. And to me, that's just fun, right? I love that kind of stuff, especially the superpowers and all that. So with Jean in particular, what's really really interesting about her character is she also has an arc throughout the film as well, and her arc mirrors Peter's arc. And towards the end of the movie, she's actually going up against Peter in particular, and she's sort of presenting the opposite side of what Peter is sort of battling against, right? Which is this idea of him having to focus on his mission or his career, and then him having to think about family and friends and all that, and sort of those two things going ahead and having to pick between this dichotomy. Jean, having lost her family, only has her mission at this point, right? And Pete, having lost his family, only has his mission at this point. And it's them coming to a head and meeting each other, that they're both able to learn from each other and grow from each other and become better at the end of the film. And I love when a film does that, where the antagonist and protagonist collide and both of them come back from it stronger and better than they were before. And you do get that here with Gene specifically. Yeah, hopefully towards the end of the recording here, I do want to nerd out a bit about some X-Men stuff and the implications of what this means for X-Men in the MCU and all that. But I'm going to save that for the very, very end of the stream. For now, I want to really talk and dive deeply into, again, Jean Grey as a character. Sadie Sink playing Jean, definitely unexpected. I have not seen her in anything before. It was very unexpected how effective she was as a character in this movie. Yeah. So to me, what stood out the most is I don't know if like all the actors that were playing Sadie like watched her act out the scenes and then they were sort of playing off of that, but you can tell there was a sass that she has to her role that all the other characters sort of brought with them when they were playing Jean, I guess, when she was possessing their minds and stuff. And I thought that was really, really cool because it's so trippy to see all the different characters just get possessed and then start talking to Pete and looking at them in a certain way. It's such a cool effect, right? One of my favorite parts of the whole movie was after Peter was, I think, coming back from seeing Doc Connors. I mean, from seeing Hulk, Bruce Banner, right? I think it was from there. He comes back and he's on the street somewhere, and next thing you know, this guy starts to talk to him. He's like, "Hey, Spider Man, oh, what's it? Are you trying to take care of the monster that's inside of you?" And that was such a like, oh man, this guy again, right? And then he or this girl again, I should say. And then she goes in and she starts to have this full-on conversation with him while she's in his room, opening up his stuff, reading his things, all of that is just absolutely like it's such a good scene. And I don't know who that actor is that they got to play that first person who was being possessed talking to Spider-Man before he webs him up. I have never seen him in anything before, but shout outs to him, man. He got like this is probably like a breakout role for him at this point. I don't know what he's from. If you guys know where he's from, let me know in the comments. But I absolutely loved his performance in that scene, and Tom Holland playing off of him, absolutely incredible, right? That was so well executed. Okay, so I remember it was when Spidey was trying to, get the communicator to work. That scene, which then leads into him having to chase down, Jean jumping from body to body to body in like this chase scene that is incredible, right? With all these New Yorkers, which shout outs to the New Yorkers in this movie. There's so many extras. I don't know how much how much money they had to pay all these people to come on set, but specifically, yeah, just jumping from extra to extra to extra, and each extra having their own lines, and getting to play around and have fun with things. Super fun, super awesome to look at and see. And then ultimately it ends with him, webbing Jean up on the helicopter and stuff. But just that whole scene all together, to me, really exemplifies the excellent execution that they have with this character and with Jean, which ultimately leads up to the kiss scene, which I'm definitely going to talk about that when I get into my scenes section. So we'll get there, right? And feel free as well. I don't know if I can maybe after this is uploaded or something, put like section markers to jump to each of the sections. But yeah, I'm definitely going to talk about that scene as well because that was, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. But ultimately, yeah, Jean was incredible in terms of the execution. In terms of what they did with her, at first I didn't like it because I was like, this is very different from the Jean Grey that we're typically used to seeing. But then when I thought about it some more, I realized, you know what? This interpretation could work, especially if they're starting from a very young age and they're gonna go at it from a different perspective of Jean evolving, I guess, into the Jean we know. And that Jean happens to be a Jean that is feisty, that is sassy, but is able to hold back some of that sass and hold back some of that feistiness in order to be composed and essentially control her powers, right? And I think that's an interesting angle and take to take with Jean Grey, one that we haven't seen as well. So I'm interested to see how it works, specifically because I do think it'll make for some interesting conversations and situations with her other X-Men, which in the nerd out section at the end of this stream, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. But overall, yeah, I like this Jean. I'm surprised at how much I like this Jean. I'm surprised at how large of a role she had in the film. But yeah, I mean, if this is going to be your first X-Men introduced, I mean, have at it, Marvel. Like, man, there was a lot of thought and work put into this character, and I very much appreciate it. So I'm excited to see more of that. Now, MJ Michelle Jones Zendaya, right? This character here is very interesting because I absolutely did not like this character at all within that first trilogy, especially in that first film. I just I was pretty upset, to be honest. I was like, give me the redhead, give me the redhead. We got the redhead in this movie, but it's not the redhead we're used to. Let's put it that way. But nonetheless, MJ in this film, I mean, absolutely steals the movie. I mean, we'll get to the kiss scene, but my goodness, there's certain scenes from her that absolutely just steal like the show. It is very interesting to see how well she's able to execute, because she has to almost play two, maybe three characters in this film in a way, right? And with every scene, it was just, to me, awesome, right? You have this version of her that is, the possessed version of her. You have the other version of her that's just like, the casual, friendly one, friendly with Frank, friendly with I was about to say Genki, with Ned, right? And you have that version of her, right? But then you also have a version of her that is the one that is trying to figure things out with Peter, and that is, str- upset essentially at the situation. And that version of her as well is very interesting to see and watch. So it's like these layers she's able to bring to her performance, even though it's not a very big one. She's not in the movie that long, but she's able to execute on those really well. And yeah, I enjoyed MJ. Next character here is Ned. So Ned is, I think, the heart of the movie to a lesser extent than Frank Castle is. That final scene with the handshake at the end, I think both of my theaters that I was in, they all just looked at that and they're like, "Oh!" Like it was just like just like an awesome moment, right? And I think the reason why that scene was placed in there specifically was because it's there to hammer home some of the main themes of the film, right? Specifically surrounding friendship and friends in particular. And I think that by them being able to execute on that and break that down effectively, I think that the reason why they ended with that there is so that it hammers home even more what that central theme is, rather than sort of leaving it up in the air. So ending with the Ned situation, I think, was really, really cool. And ultimately, I very greatly enjoyed watching a Ned when he was on screen, right? I saw someone say earlier that Spider-Man No Way Home made them like Ned prior to seeing it. And then I told that to my wife too, and she said the same thing. She's like, "Yeah, I actually liked him in this film," which is interesting because I've always liked Ned. Actually, he's one of probably favorite of Peter's entourage, right? And yeah, this movie, it was really cool, sort of seeing what they did with them here. And then Metzger, which William, I think it's William Metzger. Whew, he's a very small throwaway villain, a la classic Marvel movies with the throwaway villains. But what I do want to mention about him that's interesting for me at least is the way the actor's playing the role is really peculiar, because you don't necessarily know like how he's playing it. You can't tell whether or not he's lying or not. I mean, I couldn't half the time. And this is really hammered home in my second watch through, when the VMAX situation. He's always playing things a certain way that it's like you really don't know who he's lying or not. When he has that scene earlier with Spidey, and Spidey says, "If you know, do you know anything about VMAX?" And then he looks at him and he's like, "No, I don't." And when I saw that at first, I'm like, he's lying. He's got to be lying, because you couldn't tell, right? And the reveal they have with him later on, I like the reveal as well in terms of Peter figuring it out. But by then, I think everyone had already figured it out. What was interesting is, at least for him, and I think I mentioned this as well in my review stream, not the review video, but the review stream, is that Metzger's character was interesting because my wife had pegged him from the very first scene. She had no prior knowledge of the film or anything, right? Completely spoiler free. I was spoiler filled, so I knew from the jump, but she didn't. But as soon as she saw him, she's like, "I can't trust this guy. This guy's a villain. This guy's lying. He's evil." From the jump, she could tell something with the actor's eyes and how he was using his eyes within the scene was telegraphing everything to her, at least. And I thought that was fascinating, right? But it goes to show the importance of actors and them being able to give effective performances, because ultimately that is what they wanted in that scene, is that they wanted to leave a clue to let you know that this guy can't be trusted, but they also wanted to make it seem as though he could be trusted. And it looks as though he did his job within that scene, because my wife, who is very skeptical of people, not always, but she's the one that finds all the scams, and I'm the one who has to avoid the scams and doesn't even know that they're scams, right? But nonetheless, she was able to uh, peg them from a mile away, right? And it goes to show the performance that the actor had, William Metzger. I don't know who the actor is, but yeah, that's it about Metzger. And then lastly, here I want to talk about Black Widow, right? What's her name? Yelena Belova. So she's in this movie, and it seems like it's out of place. Like, it makes sense. Why is Yelena of all people in this movie, right? And you get some plot reasons in terms of her being able to type into a computer some stuff and figure some stuff out. But you could have had anyone show up to do that, right? Why pick Yelena specifically? And to me, I think that the reason is that if you had watched her Thunderbolts movie or New Avengers movie, right, what you'll realize is that the themes in that film surrounding specifically the importance of found family relationships, and how a found family or a family of friends essentially are helpful for when you're going through dark and difficult times, and that you need friends to go through dark and difficult times, right? And as I'm saying this, you can already tell that those themes fit very well with this movie's themes, and specifically what's going on with Peter. And you see that because Yelena specifically says that he is lonely and sad, and the reason why she's able to see is because she herself was also lonely and sad in that film. And that leads right into this film and weaves itself together in an interesting way. Right. So, yes, she's there for some plot stuff, but also she fits within the themes of the film. And to a lesser extent, Hulk as well, he's in there for some plot stuff with, gamma radiation, blah, 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 blah. But also, Hulk is notoriously a lonely character, right? A sad character. And in this film, I think what we're led to believe from Hulk's scene is that he sees Peter Parker, and Hulk remembers Peter Parker for some reason, whereas everyone else does not. And because Hulk remembers Peter Parker, he stops fighting him and, falls to his rest, I guess, because he unhulks out. So, yeah, so to a lesser extent, Hulk as well. But this idea again that these characters are fitting into these themes, and therefore, because they fit into the themes, they're able to be woven into the movie. So that is my character section. Now, I've been talking a lot about themes, but haven't really dove into them. So this is a section where I'm actually going to start talking about some of those. Specifically here, I was just talking about how Yelena and some of these characters are fitting into some of these themes. And I'll break down first what I think of a theme in the first place, right? So when I look at a theme, I look at it as a statement, and almost like a thesis statement. And that statement is being made by someone. I don't know who, the writer, director, who knows. The statement's somewhat being made here, right? And sometimes that statement isn't being made directly by people who are creating the thing, right? Sometimes the statement just jumps out of the page or jumps off of the screen, right? And that statement being made is then supported by the different scenes within the film, almost kind of like an argument where you have your thesis, and then you have your different paragraphs that are showcasing the points in the argument that you have. It's like themes work in that way. But what's interesting about movies is that you can have multiple themes at play, not just one. Whereas if you're reading an essay, typically you have one main theme and then supports for that, or one main thesis and supports for that thesis. With a film, you can have multiple different themes that support each other in a different way, or just flow within themselves. And the way those things weave through it is really, really, really interesting, really complex. And whew, it's a lot. It's a lot, right? Which is why when I say there's no such thing as entertainment, I really, really mean it. When you dive into this, there's a ton of depth that's found within this film. Uh, and because it's in the form of film, you're able to download more depth than if you were just reading an article about the same thing. It's, like I said, it's just absolutely mind blowing, right? Anyways, so to me, a theme is a statement that is then further supported by the rest of the film, right? Whatever that statement might be. And typically, those statements are surrounded, oftentimes, or grouped together, oftentimes, by a word, whatever that word might be. So, to give a quick example, if you have a movie about friendship, right? You have many themes, but those themes are associated with friendship. If you have a movie about work or career is not the theme, but you have themes surrounding it that are. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly here is I'll share my screen just to write down showcase some of the themes I was able to write down very, very quickly. Uh, Thinking about it some more, there's probably a ton more themes that flow here, but the fact that they have this many themes within the film that directly flow in from scene to scene to scene throughout the film, to me, is absolutely, again, masterful execution. So with that said, I'm going to quickly share my screen. Okay, so untitled document, perfect. All right, so y'all should be able to see my screen here. So very briefly, so Spider-Man Brand New Day themes. Uh, I had two main categories that sort of came to mind here. Two words that jumped out at me. So friendship specifically. I like to say this is a movie about friendship, and then the mission specifically, right? So these are two different areas that jumped out the page. First viewing, mission just jumped at me. Second viewing, friendship jumped at me. Now, the themes that I found surrounding the topic of friendship were, in life, you can't go at it alone. You need friends. Without the right friendships, you will never reach your fullest potential. So those are three different themes that you can draw almost a straight line through the entire film from scene to scene to scene, in terms of it showcasing to you those specifics of why you can't do it alone, right? Why you need friends, and then also why without those right friendships that you won't reach your fullest potential. And that showcased with specifically Peter, I think, in all of them, and then multiple characters kind of, tag team on some of these themes as well. Now, the two that stood out the most that I kind of want to talk about for this stream, because I can't focus in on all these on the stream right here, is work is not a substitute for human connection. That to me is huge. Work is not a substitute for human connection. And that specifically is what's going on with Pete throughout this film, right? Is he's working to substitute for the lack of Aunt May and to substitute for the lack of his friends, right? But what the movie is directly making as a statement is work is not a substitute for human connection. That's as clear as day in this movie. And I don't even know if the directors were trying to speak on this, or the writers or whatever. It's just what's jumping out at me, and what's jumping out at you might be different as well. And by all means, write down in the comments the themes that were jumping out at you. But specifically, this film is rife full of different ones, which to me is a key marker in a great piece of work, a great film, a great movie, a great whatever. The more you can learn from the thing, the greater it actually is as a thing, as a piece of media, whatever that case might be. Anyways, so you work is not a substitute for human connection. That's a huge one. And if you focus only on the mission, you won't accomplish the mission. So those two themes in particular there really stand out to me and stood out to me the most, right? So if you focus only on the mission, you won't accomplish the mission. And work is not a substitute for human connection. Those two themes are deep, and they're flowing throughout this film, like throughout it. And I'm going to break it down later on in terms of how that happens, right? Other themes here that stand out as well. Let me know if you guys want me to talk about any of these deeper, and I can do a live stream specifically on them. I am doing 100 straight days of live streaming. So I got time. I got time to tackle some of these. Anyways, the next one here is a great mission requires great relationships. That's one of the ones that kind of stood out to me throughout the film, and you can draw a straight line through some of these scenes here. Another one is, and this is more associated now with the mission aspect of things, right? Or work, whatever you want to call it, instead of the friendship side of things. But these kind of bounce back and forth. So if you don't find rest from your mission will consume you. Right? So if you don't find rest from your mission will consume you. That's one of the first themes established within the film very early on. And later on at the end of the movie, as a part of Peter's arc, what is he doing? He's not going out chasing the thing, he's resting, right? Anyways, don't let the mission get in the way of building friendships. Another theme that's woven in within the movie. And then also, your mission should not be tackled alone. That is another theme that is also found within the film. Like, it's, yeah, all these are similar, right? They're kind of surrounding each other. And that's what I mean by, like, they bounce back and forth with one another. You can literally rewatch the movie only focusing on one of those themes and seeing that pluck out in various different ways. And I'll stop sharing my screen here, but this is just kind of an example of kind of what I mean, right? Where the movie does such a great job of executing on these, not just showcasing them and laying them out, but executing them from beginning to end. And to me, I think it's just absolutely incredible, sort of how they're able to do that and what they did in order to make sure that that shows itself to be true, right? So where are we here? So yeah, so in themes, so I'll talk specifically about those two big main ones, and then I'll head over into some scenes that stood out for me. So specifically, work is not a substitute for human connection. This one's really interesting because you have a character like Peter Parker, and he's very mission minded, mission focused, which is this idea that with great power comes great responsibility. So he has to go out there, right? And do what he needs to do as Peter Parker, Spider Man. Now, what's interesting is as he focuses on his mission, by virtue of doing that, it forces him to sacrifice his relationships, and that it kind of goes hand in hand. He can't be at the prom and also be fighting off villains. He has to kind of pick between the two, and that's always been a thing with Spider-Man in terms of having to pick, sort of pick out who he's going to be, how he's going to be that, and how he's going to do things. So that's always been a thing that Pete has had to do. But what's interesting here in this movie, at least, is you're able to see that play out in an interesting way. And you sort of see the logical conclusion of that, which is that if you're only focusing on the mission, you then have no friendships around you. You have no people around you to support you. And ultimately, you end up alone, and that ends up, causing issues with your actual mission itself. You can't fully achieve or become what you're supposed to become because you do not have those relationships to help you. And this movie does such a very, very good job of illustrating that, in the sense that early on, you see him talking with the cop, and the cop is telling him to take a break, to talk to people, but actually genuinely talk to them. Like he's been speaking to her for months, doesn't even know who her children are, any of that stuff. So it's like speaking to this idea of, no, you need genuine human connection and relationships in order to thrive in whatever you're doing. So we have this idea that uh, if we want to be the best that we can be at something, that we just have to focus specifically on that thing, and that we don't have to worry about family, we don't have to worry about friends. And in fact, family kind of gets in the way of that almost, right? And this is something that definitely strikes people that are very, whether it's entrepreneurial minded, mission minded, whatever it might be. It really strikes those kind of people in a particular way, where it's like they just have to get things done, and they have to get it done in a timely manner, in an effective manner. And oftentimes what ends up happening is we overlook the simple things, the small things, like the relationships, right? And what's interesting about relationships is that there, we don't realize this, but there's a saying I love. It comes from an author by the name of Rory Vaden, is where I heard it from first, which you can kind of insert anything in this phrase, but it's like blank is never owned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day. So whatever that blank is, you can kind of insert it. So in this case, you can say something like friendship is never owned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day, right? This idea that just because someone's your friend now doesn't mean that they will be later on, right? And that you need to sort of invest into that friendship and build it up. And in this film, you see that specifically, which that Zendaya scene that we're going to talk about later, right? But you see that happen, and this idea that when you're focusing on work, it takes away from whether that's your family or your friendships or both. And you kind of have to realize that in order to reach your full potential and to be the best that you can be, you need those relationships and you need that family by your side. And I mean, there's so many angles you could take this from. Zendaya specifically kind of represents the family side of things, because there's the romance, and romance obviously leads to marriage, which then leads to children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So she's representing the family angle. But then on the flip side, you have Ned, who's also representing the friendship angle, right? And this idea that you also need friends as well. But then you also have Frank, who's also a friend, but he's a friend that's also part of the mission in a way. So it's like you don't just need friends, uh, on your personal side of things. You also need friends that are with you in the mission as well, right? And you see how the movie is able to showcase all these different types of relationships, right? And the importance of those relationships, and how ultimately they add up to form, uh, you know, who you are going to be. Without those relationships that Spidey has in this film, he's not able to ascend to his super spider form at the end of the movie, right? It's strictly because of the relationships that he ends up getting there, right? So yeah, anyways, so work is not a substitute for human connection, and it really showcases the importance of that. And then the other part of it is, if you focus only on the mission, you won't accomplish the mission, right? And I'll dive, I sort of alluded to that a little bit here and was talking about it a bit, but I'll dive deeper into it now, which is this idea that at the beginning, Peter is focusing on just being the best Spider-Man that he can be and just trying to only be Spider-Man. And what ends up happening is he starts to burn out, and specifically here, when he's burning out on focusing on the mission, uh, he can't accomplish it. And this is showcased incredibly well, where in the final fight scene, he's fighting up against all those ninjas, right? And that first version of him is a representation of Peter without the friendships, right? Without the relationships, and without him centering himself properly. And that version of himself is unable to defeat all of those ninjas in front of him. So this kind of represents this idea that if you do this thing of neglecting your friendships and neglecting your relationships and neglecting your family life and neglecting to even build a family, there's going to come a point in time in your life where you will face a challenge, and it will be a big challenge. And if you have not dealt with those things and built up those relationships, that challenge that faces you is going to overwhelm and consume you, and you won't be able to beat it. And you see that version in the fight, but then you also get this awesome version of Pete where he realizes, Jean tells him like, hey, what is it going to be? You have to decide. Because at that point he still hasn't decided yet. He's still trying to be Peter Parker and just Peter Parker. Sorry, he's still trying to be Spider-Man and just Spider-Man. He's still trying to focus just on work. But then when Jean asks him the question, who are you going to be, right? Is it Peter Parker? Is it Spider-Man? You can't choose both. She specifically says people like us cannot choose both, right? And alluding to that aspect of people that are very consumed by their mission, that are mission minded, that have to do things based upon their mission. This idea that you need friends, and that you have to deal something with that. Anyway, what ends up happening here is Pete says no on both, right? Which is this idea that he's going to still be Spider-Man, but he's going to embrace his family, he's going to embrace his friends, he's going to embrace those relationships as well, and he's not going to neglect them. And by bringing those two together, he's able to then evolve into another stage or form of himself. And you start to see how much stronger he is than he was before, how much effective he is. You start to see how easy he's able to sort of beat that problem that seconds prior was almost impossible for him. And what's amazing about this scene is that it's really able to illustrate very effectively the differences between those principles at play, right? One of the things I can say, to me at least, that is very, very stands out the most is, personally, before getting married and before having a family, uh, I still had the same passions, same dreams, all that kind of stuff, right? But at the same time, I was having difficulties with the day to day stuff and having money for things, all that kind of stuff. So it was hard to kind of pursue my passions, dreams, and all of that, right? But what's interesting is after I got married, that on one end, the marriage takes up time, right? And takes up time away from what you're looking to do. But at the same time, I can very confidently say I wouldn't be speaking to you guys here right now had I not been married. Genuinely, I don't think it's the case, because there's also this sense of encouragement that comes, and wisdom that comes from that relationship. And you sort of see some of that here within the film, where Pete is looking to do something. Now, the thing he's looking to do is misguided, but he's still looking to do it. And he's able to ultimately complete it because he's able to get advice from his, MJ, and his MJ is able to give him advice to then help figure out the tracker thing on the neck, and have him repair that, right? But he's also able to then use some of that knowledge as well, to take down, I think, Gene, at least initially, right? And there's other things as well that he's able to do, that he wouldn't have been able to do had he not been in that relationship. But there's another aspect of things as well, where something else happens here in the film. Specifically, it has to do with, uh, what is it? I'm drawing on a blank right now. But anyways, the point of the matter is that you are able to see very well that in order for Pete to be the best version of himself, he needs those relationships alongside of him to get there in those smaller, subtle ways, but then in those bigger, more major and larger ways as well, which you see towards the end of the film. And yeah, this is very clear as day, I think, within the movie, and it's a very important thing to realize and to think about. And at least for me, when I get into my takeaway section, I can talk a bit more about that as well. But yeah, anyways, with that said, now we can dive specifically into some of these themes or scenes, I should say, and the scenes that stood out the most to me. So let's see here. So the the first scene that to me stood out the most was the Jean Grey reveal. Specifically, the there's two of them, right? There's the reveal where you see her name printed on screen, Jean Elaine Gray, right? When that happened in the theater the first time around, everyone just gasped. Now, I was like, this is like a Thursday night showing. So everyone there was like very much, at least in the know with Marvel and stuff. So they're like, oh, Jean Grey, what? That doesn't make sense. And when I was there, I knew the entire time it was Jean because I get into spoilers sometimes. But my wife in particular had no idea. She had no idea who the character was. And in her mind, she's like, there's no way this is Jean. That doesn't make any sense. She shouldn't be in this movie. So when the reveal comes, she's like, oh, wow. How? How did I not know it was Jean? And because they changed the character so much from how the character is, part of that as well plays into the twist of not knowing it's Jean, right? So to me, that was interesting as well. But I really like the reveal where the second reveal where Metzger's like, who is this, right? And then she's like, you know who this is? It's Jean Grey, and it's like, oh man, what a character reveal, because I think that was the moment within the film where you're not sort of seeing little snippets of her in the shadows. You're seeing her performance fully in front of you on screen without any sort of, stuff going on. And to me, that reveal is really, really nice. Now, one of the scenes I know you guys have been waiting for me to talk about, and I really want to get into specifically, is the kiss scene with Zendaya, right? Uh, there's something I thought about with this scene that I thought was pretty funny, which was, Tom Holland and Zendaya are married, right? So it would be pretty funny if, like, in the original script or whatever, they had Jean Grey kissing, Spider-Man, and then she looks at the script and she's like, "Hey, let's rework this a little bit. I got an idea for you guys." I don't know. I thought that'd be funny, right? So to kind of, do something where only she can kiss her man on set while she's on set, kind of a thing, which I don't know. My mind goes places sometimes, but I think that's funny. Anyways, the kiss scene with Zendaya. I think that of all the Spider-Man kisses with the different, with the MJs or the love interests, this is by far the best one. I mean, come on, guys. This is by far the best one. And it's horrible that it is because it's such a gut-wrenching scene. It's so like, oh man, I've seen it twice, and both times it's just like, oh, you feel it. The whole theater is just like, gasping. Like it's such a rough scene to look at. And the second time around, like the reveal of hold her, and then like when she says to hold her, like because you've wanted to for a long time, it's just, man, it is such a incredible scene. And specifically what I noticed the second time around is that if you notice Zendaya's performance here, she is a little, it's super, super subtle, but usually when Zendaya's talking within the film, she did it a lot in the first Spider-Man movie as well, that she shows up in, which is she has like this raspy talk where she talks like this. Oh yeah, that thing over there. Yeah, like there's like this thing about her voice where she's trying to show low effort, not showing maximum effort, right? And that happens often, but in that scene in particular, and sometimes a bit later on, she has a little bit more sass to her, especially after the reveal. But specifically when she's asking the questions and stuff, you can tell just a little bit that something is off from the typical Zendaya. At first, when I was watching, I thought it was just different because, you know, it's been so long since we have seen her that maybe that's just how she speaks now. But you can even tell from the scene with the flowers And that scene specifically, that there is a slight difference in the performance that is there, so that when the kiss happens and then the reveal happens, it's like part of you is like, oh no way it was her, but then another part of you is like, I think I could tell that it was also not her, right? Like it doesn't come out of nowhere is essentially what I'm saying. And that's the second time I think in the film where you have a reveal that happens, but the only way that reveal is, I guess, hinted at is through the actor's performance. And that is to me incredible, because the thing about twists, right, that work is that when you have a twist, it needs to be a twist that is somewhat telegraphed, meaning you have to have been able to catch it and you just didn't catch it, rather than it just comes out of nowhere, right? A proper twist is set up. The reason for that is, and this is actually kind of cool, so I'm going to nerd out a bit here, specifically with the theory stuff, is that when you have a twist that's properly set up, as a viewer, it feels nice because you're like, ah, you got me, bro, right? You got me, director, you got me, writer. So a good twist is set up that way. Now, specifically, when a bad twist is set up, you kind of get that negative reaction and you reject it, right? So the reason why that is, at least I think, is that in life, there's oftentimes situations where there are things that are telltale signs prior to a major thing happening. There are things that you might notice, or little hints that you'll have throughout your life about something going to happen. And then the thing happens, right? And it's like, you think back on it like, oh, if I had caught this or this or this, maybe things would have been different. Maybe things would have changed, right? But it's like, that twist could have been avoided had you paid attention to those signs. And what twists tend to teach us is that we need to pay more attention to the little things in life, right? And those little things in life may lead to bigger things later on. And that's what's really cool about the twist mechanic in film, which I really like. But also, it's really cool because, yeah, it teaches us in a way, right? It's one of the ways in which film can teach in ways that other forms of media cannot, right? And I think that's really cool. Seriously, like I think it's really, really nice. And that's just a bit, side note tangent. But yeah, so I really liked that reveal specifically. And it's similar to the Metzger reveal as well that happens later on. So there's this scene where Pete is with MJ and Ned, and they're just sitting there, right? And next thing you know, as they're sitting there, they realize, what was it? They realize that Pete realizes that Metzger had lied. And this is so great because it's just subtle thing, and they really pay attention to the subtleties in this film. Pete notices that he lied when he was talking about the memory, and that was the ultimate reveal, right? And that I think was really, really key, because then Pete was able to go back and save Jean, right? Or I guess she would have saved herself in this case, but nonetheless, he was able to go at least try to save her. And I think that was really, really interesting in terms of how they he was able to find that, because he found that out because he was resting, because he was taking time to hang out with his friends. And what that kind of represents in an interesting way is a lot of the greatest ideas throughout history happen when the person is away from their workplace. They happen when the person is not working at all. They're doing other stuff. They're thinking about other things. And in doing so, they get that epiphany, they get that light bulb moment, and then they go back into the lab and work on it. And this is actually a visual representation of that in an interesting way. That if you're not taking a break from the work, if you're not taking a break from what it is that you're doing, you don't get those light bulb moments. You don't get those eurekas. And ultimately, you're not able to hit your fullest potential. It's just not possible. And I like that scene because it showcases the themes incredibly well, and it showcases them really awesome in a really awesome way in that scene, right? And to me, I think it's really, really cool and really great as well. The next thing, and this scene really stood out to me the most, right? And I think this will be the last scene I'll talk about today, just for now, because I'm coming up on an hour now. But the scene with Punisher and Spider-Man, and in that scene, I forget what Spider-Man says to set off Frank, but he mentions something about his situation and trying to relate his situation to Frank. And he says, "I, you know what how it is. I do everything by myself. I do everything alone. You know how it is." Something like that. And then Frank just gets pissed. He's like, What are you talking about? Do you think this is something that I chose? Do you think that if for 1 second I could be with the people I love, that I wouldn't do it?" And man, the performance in that scene, the you know, you could feel it. You could feel it in his throat, right? Like he really was feeling that, and it gets cut off because Pete has to leave or whatever, right? But I think that to me cemented why Frank was in the film. Because before that, I was like, it's fun to see him here, but come on, man, there's a lot of people here. Why is Frank in this movie? But when you see that scene and they have that moment, to me, it's such a great moment because it showcases those two characters, right? Frank Castle and Peter Parker, but it also showcases how those characters contrast with the themes within the film, right? Because both of them are also playing with those same themes of friendships, or sorry, those same themes surrounding friendship and surrounding uh, consuming yourself in your work, right? And what's great about a movie that executes well on its themes is that it's not just woven through one character in the movie, it's woven through multiple characters in the movie, and specifically the three main characters in this movie of Jean Grey, Peter Parker, and Frank Castle. All three of them are working with a lot of those themes that I mentioned, right? And specifically this idea of friendship and needing friends, right? And the importance of those friends in ultimately becoming who you're supposed to be, to me, is very, very profound and shown in this scene, because Frank was saved by Peter. And because he was saved by Peter, he was there in the first place. But then Frank was also able to then come and go and save Peter as well. And in a way as well, F- Peter was able to then save Frank from himself later on, when he realizes that he shouldn't always go for the kill, essentially, because he almost killed his own friend. So there's this back and forth that keeps happening within the characters, where they're able to, I guess, sharpen one another in an interesting way, right? And there's this idea that with friendships, iron sharpens iron. If the iron is by itself, it becomes dull and weak. But with a friend, it's able to sharpen it and get better, right? And this scene is able to showcase, or yeah, that scene is able to sort of cement that relationship between the two of them in an interesting way. And then that follow-up scene later on at the end of the film, where Frank is there, at the bedside, and they're laughing and Frank cries and all of that, like, it really cements and showcases again the growth of their friendship. Because at the beginning of the movie, it's very surface level, they don't really like each other, but then towards the end of the film, you start to see how rich and beautiful that friendship becomes. And ultimately, that is another one of the friendships that helps to save Peter in the end, right? Because Frank is able to bring Peter to the hospital. And then, yeah, that happens as well. And then this, I know I said that was the last scene, but I do want to talk about this scene as well, which is that scene where Peter Parker opens up to Jean, right? At the end of the film. This idea again of, uh, in order for you to be able to even make friends, you have to be able to open up, right? This is, again, that's alluding to another theme that is somewhere within this film that I didn't even write down, right? But this idea that you have to be able to open up. You see it happen with Zendaya's character, where she says she's closed off and doesn't open up. Peter mentions it where he's closed off, doesn't open up. Uh, Jean is also closed off, not opening up. Same thing, right? So all these characters are going through that same problem. And in Pete, you see him there. He's able to open up to Jean, right? And like literally open up his mind. And she's able to go in there, and she sees that scene with Aunt May that we've been seeing throughout the film. And that scene talks about being special, and specifically about people are going to want you for certain things and all that. But one of the things you have to remember specifically is the people around you that love you, right? And that they love you not because of what you can do, but because of who you are. And that is able to get through to Jean, specifically because of her mummy issues, and as well because it allows Pete to then open up in a conversation with her. And the way he's able to beat Jean is through the power of friendship. But specifically in this situation, he befriends her, and he says, "Hey, I'm here for you as a friend." And because they become friends, he then has to prove his friendship right afterward in taking the bullet for her, and that ultimately is able to win her over. And she then goes about the process of keeping him alive for the next 24 or 48 hours, however long it is, before he ultimately is gone, right? But you start to see again the culmination of everything happening within that climactic scene there, where you're able to see the themes at play in terms of him opening up to her, and then her learning from him, and then in turn both of them growing from the situation, and her going off a better character, him going off a better character as well, and them being friends essentially, right? So to me, that is really well set up in the movie, really well executed in the movie, and ultimately lasts, right? So when I look at all those things together and sort of bunch them up, you sort of start to see like how incredibly well crafted this movie is. Like, there's just so much there. I'm looking forward to seeing it again because I know that with each viewing, different things stand out. The second time around, all the themes surrounding friendship stood out like crazy. But the first time around, all the themes surrounding work and your mission stood out like crazy. And what's really cool is with each viewing, you don't even know what's going to stand out to you, right? And it's why I really emphasize the importance of when you see a film, right? A great film, it's important to not watch it just once but multiple times because you're able to get more out of it, you're able to digest more out of it. And one cool activity is, I'm here speaking about this just in public, just communicating my thoughts on it. It's helpful for me to process things as well, right? But at the same time, for you, I recommend everyone do it because this is a great practice just to process these thoughts that come from these different things, because there's a lot of takeaways that you get from watching these movies. And that's why I kind of want to end this spoiler review, is a lot of my takeaways from it, specifically surrounding the whole themes of friendship and all of that kind of jazz, right? And to me, it's making one thing clear for me, at least, is that oftentimes we'll have relationships, and those relationships will be surface level. They'll be high by, oh, hey, how's the dog? Oh, hey, how's this? And they're very surface level basic relationships. And ultimately, those relationships, although they're there, they're not really deeper friendships. And ultimately, what will serve us best, and what this movie is showing, is that we build stronger, deeper relationships with people because we're able to share things that we need help with, or whatever the case might be. But also, those relationships ultimately unlock aspects of ourselves that we don't even realize are there. One thing that stood out to me is that in the movie, you have Peter have different types of friendships, right? And those different types of friendships are helpful for him in different ways in unlocking different aspects of himself. So he'll have his relationship with Ned, where he'll geek out and talk about different things with Ned that he'll never talk about with Frank, right? With Punisher, which doesn't make sense. But at the same time, he will have conversations with Punisher that he won't have with Ned, and he'll be able to grow from both of them. He'll be able to evolve from both of them, right? And to me, one of the things that's really standing out to me is I'm the type of person that's very driven, mission minded, whatever you want to call it, right? And sometimes I will neglect those friendships, and I will neglect, realizing that I have to be able to express myself in certain ways with certain relationships, and it's a necessary thing, right? So the importance of reaching out to people and growing in your relationships and really taking the time to invest in them, to me, I notice is very, very, very important. And one of the things that this movie, at least to me, is standing out the most as a takeaway, if there's any takeaway at all, is to take that seriously and to be patient with it. Recently, I reached out to someone and we hung out, and it was a great hangout. I loved it. And I hadn't seen him in 3 years, I think it was. And when I had reached out to him to come hang out and all that kind of stuff, I didn't get like a response back, right? But one of the things I noticed is that we're all sort of caught in this web of busyness almost, right? That it's hard to just get in touch with someone sometimes to get a response back. So there was follow-up that was needed in order for us to actually meet. And that follow-up was very much necessary. But ultimately, with the follow-up, we were able to get the meeting going, right? And it's one of those things where it's like, I'm so grateful for that meeting having happened, having had and you know what I'm talking about. I'm so glad for us being able to hang out. And there's going to be more subsequent hangouts, but it took effort to get it done the first time around. And I'm realizing it's going to take more effort, but the effort is going to be worth it ultimately for myself and for all involved, right? And quick shout outs as well. In this movie, you notice situations with Zendaya, who's representing sort of the family and the wife character, and how there's key points in which she's able to help Peter out with his mission and what he's doing specifically. Shout outs to my wife on this specific thing I'm talking about, because oftentimes she'll, check some stuff on my phone, might send a message here or there, right? And she saw the conversation I had started, and she saw it was sort of going nowhere, and she went and actually, typed up a follow up, right? and put the follow up in there. And had that not happened, personally, I probably wouldn't have followed up on it for months myself, right? Just because, again, uh, I'm making the same mistake Peter is making in this movie sometimes, right? And it's like being able to have that assist essentially is helpful, because now all of a sudden we are having that meeting. And this goes to show in terms of in this movie how it showcases to you that you're not able to become who you're supposed to become unless you have the right relationships around you. One of those relationships for me at least is my wife, but also some of those relationships are friendships that I do have. And investing in those in terms of the time and the effort is really, really crucial and really, really important. And to me, again, that's the biggest takeaway from this movie, for myself. And I'm looking forward to sort of seeing where that leads down the road here. But ultimately, like, yeah, I'm blown away. I'm blown away by this movie, and I'm really excited to see what else I can learn from it, right? As I have subsequent viewings. So, let me know what you guys think. I want to hear what your takeaways are from the movie. Write them down in the comment section. I want to hear specifically, what did you take home with you from this film? What is it that you're going to sort of learn from and maybe switch up? All right. I'm really curious because yeah, there's obviously stuff that I was able to uncover that I'm looking forward to implementing, but I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are in the comments and sort of where that leads, right? Because ultimately, as this movie tries to allude to, is that we can't do this on our own. Uh, Here I am talking about entertainment the way that I am, right? And the method that I am, and it's not something that I can do by myself. I don't think I'm a guru or a genius in any of this stuff. It's just something I noticed, and I noticed no one's talking about it in this kind of way, and I wanted to do that, at least for my own sanity, but also I'm curious to learn from other people as well in terms of what they're able to learn from movies and what they're able to pick up as well, so that I can better myself in some way. So hopefully, I can get some people in this community that is able to, yeah, grow with us, right? I don't know what I can call this yet, or what I can call the community. Maybe you guys can leave something in the comments surrounding what we can call that there. But I do encourage some feedbacks and back and forth with anyone who's watching and who's watched this far into the video or into the stream. We're like an hour and 12 minutes in. This has been quite the spoiler stream, but nonetheless, these are my thoughts, spoiler thoughts, on Spider-Man Brand New Day. As I have more thoughts and more things come up, I'll definitely do some more videos. If there's anything that stood out to you guys in terms of themes earlier that we talked about, feel free to leave in the comments what you want me to talk about surrounding the movie, or if you want me to dive deeper into a specific thing that I mentioned. But yeah, with that said, guys, it's your man Lex. This has been Theory of Entertainment. Thank you guys for tuning in once again, and I'll check you guys in the next stream. All right, peace.